Oh, hello there, friends. I'm Dr. Samuel Shepard, Chief Researcher here at Humane Labs. As you can see, everyone's gone home for the day, and I'm here setting up the lab for tomorrow's next round of cutting-edge experiments. I thought it might be fun to show some of you foreign demons from the outside world, outside of our Rockstar universe, some of the research we've done on Ped neurological behavior. If you'll follow me this way to our research room, I'll show you what I mean. Yes, right in here, right in here. Beautiful day today, beautiful day. Let's see here. Or maybe, let's see. Aha! Here it is. Yes, indeed, indeed. Just looking at this brings back so many memories. In this experiment, we asked Mr. Phillips, a wonderful man who helped sign up to get a reduction in his prison sentence, if he would follow around a beat cop with a body cam, not to agitate him, but to keep him spawned in for as long as possible and to see what the side effects can be for members of the Los Santos PD when working long shifts. You see, in our universe, keeping peds active without giving them a break can lead to some rather interesting side effects. This study was ultimately used to give more breaks to members of the LSPD who often, as a requirement of their job, experience heightened senses of rage and even euphoria stemming from shooting people who've committed even the slightest infraction of the law. Let's have a look at this, shall we? And here we catch up with Mr. Phillips, falling over, appears to be some sort of inebriated, drunken, homeless man living near the mall. And he begins his case study. Following Sergeant McAdams, keeps up a tough look, doesn't appear to really know where he's going. Something you see commonly, actually. As they're walking away, Trevor's getting a little close. Appears to be thinking about considering pulling a hammer out. And we have our first interaction. The officers clearly become agitated. Trevor's trying to de-escalate the situation here. Mr. Phillips walks away, doesn't make any rash moves, doesn't pull anything out, put his hands in his pockets. He continues to follow the police officer as the police officer's been so agitated he no longer knows exactly where he's going. Mr. Phillips, probably on some sort of hallucinogen, has also decided to walk into the bushes and hide there for a second. Mr. Phillips is trying to replicate the same thing that happened earlier. Oh, here we go. Seeing if he could attempt to pull out that weapon, if that would trigger something going into his pockets like that. Not sure yet, still at this point, if putting his hands in his pockets triggered that response or if getting too close did. It was very similar to the other response, you know. The officer asks if he's following him, asserts his dominance, and as Mr. Phillips walks away, he, hits him with a snide remark. Here we go. Trevor doing his best to just de-escalate the situation every time every time it sort of peaks or gets to a heightened state of intensity. But part of this, he doesn't really want to agitate him, but part of this is that we have asked Mr. Phillips here to sort of put some additional pressure on the police by merely being here. Sergeant McAdams turns and walks away, changes direction. Not sure if he's testing Mr. Phillips following him. that much is unclear at this point. Now, this opportunity here gives us some additional insight. We get to see how Sergeant McAdams will act after a prolonged period of time being monitored, and with multiple other citizens of the city walking around to interact with him as well. Mr. Phillips obviously trying not to look as though he's following Sergeant McAdams. Trevor did not like that comment, but he continued to de-escalate the situation. This is very uncharacteristic for Mr. Phillips because he is actually a hardened criminal and big smart ass. So this must have been difficult for him to do his job, but if you want the pay, if you want that sentence reduction, Mr. Phillips, yeah, and so in their training, lots of these police officers, they learn a few phrases here and tend to use those repeatedly. What you can see here from this sort of neurological behavior, you can see something that comes up in police training. All right, now it appears as though Mr. Phillips is purposefully agitating some of the other citizens, the Peds. Ped neurology is an interesting thing because many times what generally people would be afraid of in Los Santos proper like this, over here on the ritzier side of town, we're up near Vinewood. We're very close to Vinewood, and oftentimes what would scare these individuals sometimes provokes an aggressive response from the police, and we're going to see some of that here, I think.
Stay far away from me. I know people.
See, just even getting that close and in this appearance to somebody and having this sort of personality type or visible personality type. If you look, we've got an obviously inebriated homeless man here walking around. It scares some of the Peds, the other civilians of LS. Okay, now Mr. Phillips is clearly getting a little bored because looks like he's doing his best to agitate some of the other Peds, which is not really in his part of the primary function of this here, but he goes sideways every now and again.
I can't believe I'm seeing this.
I think what Mr. Phillips is trying to do here is cause other Peds to walk sort of into the police officer, Sergeant McAdams, so that they will, to see if he can elicit some kind of a response. And he did. So he can tell now, Mr. Phillips could tell that when he agitates Sergeant McAdams, Sergeant McAdams will reply, explain to him that he'll reach for his pistol, which is frightening, and pretty standard actually in LS. But reach for his pistol, let you know that you're pushing his buttons, and give you the chance to walk away. And if you do, basically tells you better have learned your lesson. Now, walking that close to a regular citizen who doesn't have the LSPD training would generally elicit a fearful response in a place like this in the Vinewood area. But as you can see, the police training really kicks in and elicits this sort of aggressive response rather than a fearful response from the police officers. Which is what we want in our cities, you know? Minimal crime, minimal crime. The officer doesn't seem to have noticed yet that Mr. Phillips is definitely following him around. However, he may have, and he may just know that there's not much he can do about it. Yes, the old ball scratch. We have a truck running a red light. The officer does nothing about it. Sergeant McAdams here doesn't seem to care. Trevor's going to try to do one of those pushovers again.
What's wrong with you?
Where he pushes the ped to see if he can provoke him into the cop. Now that was interesting. Trevor looked like he turned around like he maybe wanted a piece of that guy. But again, Trevor's interested in getting the sentence reduction. He's going to do his job.
Are you looking for trouble?
Yeah, getting a little closer. Just keeps walking. That's a good idea.
Next time, know your place.
So what we've noticed here is that oftentimes when Trevor turns around and walks away after that, the cop turns around as well. Seems to follow him. In this case, the cop did not turn around and change direction. He continued to head south down here.
Whatever. You're about to have serious trouble.
Okay, now Trevor obviously provokes two citizens, two peds on the street. Didn't get near the cop, so that Sergeant McAdams' response there was directly related to Trevor's provocation of the other citizens of LS, and that's part of his job, you know. So clearly we now know that some of their training includes not only aggressive reactions towards things that other people in Vinewood might fear, but also aggressive actions towards making other people in Vinewood afraid. We're really digging into the neurology here on this.
You better have learned your lesson. Whoa. You need to find peace, Rob.
Now, typical Vinewood. Police officer does, Sergeant McAdams does a great job of, oh, careful Trevor.
Shits with more brains.
Oh boy.
What's with you?
So I've noticed Sergeant McAdams does a great job of following the law here. He never jaywalks, mostly. I mean, I haven't seen him jaywalk yet. That's pretty interesting.
Yo, you stepped on. Shit, get away from me, you scumbag.
Wow.
You dumbass. I didn't mean that shit.
Trevor still standing up for himself, having a mostly impolite interaction with a citizen, a ped who is not polite to him. No big deal though. The cop understands there's no threats meant by any of this. Sergeant McAdams allows it to happen, and he's keeping an eye out, make sure everyone's cool. Here they go. They have a walk sign. Trevor, Mr. Phillips here reported that he was tired of seeing the officer walk in the same direction, so he was seeing if he could potentially prevent him from turning around or heading back in another direction. The best thing to do here would have been not to turn around because it looks like the cop, Sergeant McAdams, will follow him. Okay, he did not here. He did not. He turned back around. He's ready to turn again. Trevor cleaning his teeth with his fingernails. That's wonderful. Okay, so all walk. Everyone has a walk sign, all directions.
Your car is the shit.
You don't follow me. We follow you. Next time, show some respect.
And the cop is going to be here as traffic starts moving, so Mr. Phillips reported there that it was unclear as he looked back whether or not the cop would be running at him or running to get out of the way of traffic until he reached until Sergeant McAdams reached the sidewalk, and that was when he realized that it was no threat. But Mr. Phillips played it cool the whole time and continued walking. Now we're really getting on here, we're moving into a different part of Vinewood. More of the Cedar side. Of course, going uphill, walking north or right from here would take us up to the Vinewood Hills, a nicer area in Los Santos, and of course the Vinewood Strip. But we have this event here that takes place, and Trevor's going to pretend as though maybe this is his car.
You're a total moron.
Doesn't like that this guy's showing up, so he basically tells him to keep moving on. And here we go. Where are we going to go from here? Now, the officer at this point has been on the beat for hours without a break and being sort of followed, not really agitated, but followed certainly by a homeless person. So he may be starting to crack. That's the pressure we believe they'd be under. That's what we expect to see. Some pressure starting to amp up. And as we all know, living in Los Santos or San Andreas in general, after going a long time without taking a break, things can get a little weird, not just with our attitudes and behaviors, but with the city in general. So let's see what happens. Sergeant McAdams here is really fixated on Mr. Phillips at this point. So Trevor sees if he can agitate him. Alright, he's starting to get a little turned around now. So we see a little. We hear a little bit of Vinewood business being conducted. And some sort of an agent pushing for her client to be working on that film. Trevor's getting real comfortable in his skin. He's starting to make more insults to people as he interact more as he goes along. We're really outside the bounds here. We're headed towards the courthouse past a construction area. Oh boy. Now this interaction causes Sergeant McAdams to start heading back this way, which is interesting because I wonder where it would have gone staying outside of it, or heading outside of the Rockford Plaza area here in Vinewood. Everyone's being cool.
Watch it, shithead!
Oh, great.
to touch me! Get away!
That doesn't seem fair. Nobody touch her. Alright, Trevor not causing too big of a scene here. Doesn't want to bump her, obviously, but well, it looks like he's trying to brush up against her.
Next time, know your place.
Yeah. It's interesting how the direction that Trevor takes. This is something we hadn't known and noticed in the study previously, but it's interesting how the direction Trevor takes seems to alter the path of the Sergeant McAdams and where he goes thereafter. I wonder if this is him trying to anticipate Mr. Phillips' move or what. He takes,
Even your parents can't stand
takes no action with a person who's parked, obviously stopped in the middle of a crosswalk at a red light. People running red lights, not stopping appropriately. None of these laws are big enough to get action taken, apparently. And as you know, if you drive around LS, you don't care if you run some red lights and whatnot.
Very interesting opportunity for you to fuck me in the ass.
Okay.
Listen, buddy, I was shoving bum deals door to door when you were still neck deep in your mom's tits. Or to fuck a motherfucker, asshole.
Oh, some of these peds are just so classic. Oh, there is some action going on here. Now that is really rare that you have another officer show up and actually just happen to be in the area, show up and hit his lights, and then engage another ped outside of Mr. Phillips. And it looks like it's turned into a shootout here. We have a vehicle in the middle of the intersection. We have the police car where the cops are hiding behind it, shooting right now. The city is definitely behaving strangely at this point. All the cops are too. Looks like the individual may have run a red light with a cop behind it. It's turned into a shootout somehow. Ooh. Mr. Phillips almost run over. And this is classic police procedure, you know, get the vehicle to stop and then shoot the individual to death. It's sort of how things work in LS, usual protocol. Standard LSPD procedure. Let's have a look at what we've got over here. We see a young male who may or may not have had a pistol on him. Doesn't anymore, that's for sure. Looks like he engaged the police, potentially in a shootout. I don't see any bullets on the vehicle's car, so I can't tell if he shot. Now this is weird. There's a trash can at the center of the car. This can should be outside. Let's see if we can get in here. Mr. Phillips tries to get in. The causes an obvious reaction. The car, the city scuffs, resets itself. And Mr. Phillips has borrowed the police vehicle. Of course, if they see that, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. And this is about where our study ends. I know Mr. Phillips was waiting on scene for the EMTs to arrive, but there they go, right past him. So I think at that point he thinks that he'll just park the car in the intersection, hit the lights, and he stated he did this so that people would stop running over the poor man who was shot by the cops. Of course, what he just did there was tampering with evidence, moving of the body. It's already further contaminates the scene, even beyond how bad it was before. But at this time, since nobody's coming to do anything about it, Mr. Phillips gets in the individual's car and leaves with it. Well, there you are, folks. An absolutely fascinating case study in ped neurology, especially with relation to members of the LSPD. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much.